Address to the President of the Security Council. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council. Thank you for the invitation to brief you on the incident in Salisbury in the United Kingdom on 4th of March 2018. As I have no independent information on this issue, I will be conveying information kindly provided by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, or OPCW. Mr. President, the Council has met previously to discuss the 4th of March incident in Salisbury involving a toxic chemical, allegedly a nerve agent, and the poisoning and hospitalization of 3 individuals as a result. As you are therefore aware, and as part of its response to this incident, the United Kingdom requested technical assistance from the OPCW Technical Secretariat under Article 8 of the Chemical Weapons Convention. This article states that the OPCW Secretariat shall provide technical assistance and technical evaluation to states parties in the implementation of the provisions of the Convention, including evaluation of scheduled and unscheduled chemicals. Accordingly, the OPCW Director General decided to dispatch a team to the United Kingdom for a technical assistance visit, or TAV. The TAV team deployed to the United Kingdom on 19th March for a pre-deployment, and from 21 to 23 March for a full deployment. In the course of its work, the team received information on the medical conditions of the 3 individuals affected and collected blood samples from those individuals under full chain of custody for delivery to the OPCW laboratory and subsequent analysis by OPCW designated laboratories. In addition to these activities, the TAV team conducted on-site sampling of environmental samples, again under full chain of custody. The team also requested and received splits of samples taken by British authorities for comparative purposes and to verify the analysis of the United Kingdom. The team was briefed on the toxic chemical that had been identified by the United Kingdom and reviewed analytical results and data from chemical analysis of biomedical samples collected by United Kingdom authorities from the affected individuals, as well as from environmental samples collected on site. The OPCW has since stated that the results of analysis of biomedical samples conducted by OPCW designated laboratories demonstrate the exposure of the 3 affected individuals to this toxic chemical. In addition, the results of analysis of the environmental samples conducted by OPCW designated laboratories demonstrated the presence of this toxic chemical in the samples. Finally, the results of analysis by the OPCW designated laboratories of environmental and biomedical samples collected by the OPCW TAV team confirm the findings of the United Kingdom relating to the identity of the toxic chemical that was used on 4th of March in Salisbury. The TAV team has noted that the toxic chemicals in question was of high purity. Mr. President, based on the results of the sample analysis by 4 OPCW designated laboratories, the OPCW Technical Secretariat prepared a report containing and elaborating on the information I just shared. This report was transmitted to the United Kingdom and, upon the request of the United Kingdom, to all other states parties of the CWC on 12th of April. The OPCW has also prepared and made publicly available a summary of this report. Speaking today at a meeting of the OPCW Executive Council, the Director General underscored that the reliability and technical capabilities of the OPCW designated laboratories have been subject to close and rigorous scrutiny over the years. He added that states parties to the Chemical Weapons Convention can be assured of the credibility and integrity of this network. He further noted that the work of the TAV in relation to this incident was carried out independently by the OPCW without involvement or support of other states parties, and that it was not part of the United Kingdom's own internal investigation. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, the Secretary General has expressed his deep concern by the assessment that a nerve agent was employed in a targeted manner aimed at inflicting harm or death. The Secretary General has also, on many occasions, expressed his support for the work of the OPCW. In this regard, he welcomed the request by the United Kingdom to independently verify the toxic chemical that was used in this incident. The use of nerve agents or any other chemical weapons by any party under any circumstances is unacceptable and a serious violation of international law. I thank you very much for your attention.
I thank Ms. Nakamitsu for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much to the High Representative who has read out the findings, and thank you also on behalf of the United Kingdom to the OPCW and its staff themselves. The Council invited us to keep it updated, Mr. President. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting today. We wish to brief on the latest stage in the investigation, but I will also cover briefly findings, attribution, and a refutation of some of the public statements that have been made by Russia against my country. This meeting is being held immediately after one in The Hague that the High Representative referred to of the Executive Council of the OPCW. And I would just like to stress, if I may, Mr. President, that the report itself has been circulated without any redaction or amendment to the states parties, and to underscore the point, I'd like to stress that the report to Executive Council members is exactly the same report that the United Kingdom itself received. As the High Representative has set out, the OPCW's findings confirm the United Kingdom's analysis of the identity of the toxic chemical. It supports our finding that a military-grade nerve agent was used in Salisbury. As our investigation has found, and OPCW has verified, the highest concentrations of the agent were found on the handle of Mr. Scripal's front door. It is, therefore, Mr. President, the chemical that we said it was, and this has been confirmed by an independent mechanism. I'd like to just say a word about the use of the term Novichok. This is a term we use to describe these chemicals. We take the Russian term for such nerve agents. The OPCW report itself does not use the term Novichok, but the point I wish to stress is that it is the chemical that we said it was, and so there shouldn't be any lack of clarity on that point. The report sets out the full forensic chain of custody. It sets out how there could be no contamination. It explains how environmental samples were analysed by 2 laboratories and biomedical samples by 2 further laboratories. Finally, the report notes the absence of any significant amounts of impurities in the chemicals that were detected. High purity is the description given in the executive summary in paragraph 11. This suggests in turn that a highly sophisticated laboratory, i.e. a state laboratory, made the chemicals. The identification of the nerve agent used is an essential piece of technical evidence in the ongoing investigation. But the Porton Down analysis and the OPCW report do not identify the country or laboratory of origin of the agent used in this attack. So I would like to explain, Mr. President, the wider picture which has led the United Kingdom to assess that there's no plausible alternative explanation than Russian state responsibility for what happened in Salisbury. In our view, Mr. President, only Russia had the technical means, operational experience, and the motive to target the Scripals. If I may turn first to technical means, a combination of credible open source reporting and intelligence shows that in the 1980s, the Soviet Union developed a new class of 4th generation nerve agents. These were known in Russia and then more broadly as Novichoks. The key institute responsible for this work is a branch of the State Institute for Organic Chemistry and Technology at Shikani. The code word for the offensive chemical weapons program, of which Novichoks were one part, was Foliant. It is highly likely that Novichoks were developed to prevent detection by the West and to circumvent international chemical weapons controls. The Russian state has previously produced Novichoks and would still be capable of doing so today. Within the last decade, Russia has produced and stockpiled small quantities of Novichoks. Russia's chemical weapons program continued after the collapse of the Soviet Union. By 1993, when Russia signed the Chemical Weapons Convention, it's likely that some had passed acceptance testing. This meant they could be used by the Russian military. Russia's CWC declaration failed to report work on Novichoks. Russia further developed some Novichoks after ratifying the convention. And in the mid-2000s, President Putin himself was closely involved in the Russian chemical weapons program. It is highly unlikely, Mr. President, that any former Soviet republic other than Russia pursued an offensive chemical weapons program after independence. No terrorist group or non-state actor would be able to produce this agent in the purity described by the OPCW testing, and this is something Russia has acknowledged. Secondly, Mr. President, I'd like to refer to operational experience. Russia has a proven record of conducting state-sponsored assassination, including on the territory of the United Kingdom. The independent inquiry into the death of Alexander Litvinenko concluded in January 2016 that he was deliberately poisoned with polonium, that the FSB had directed the operation, and that President Putin probably approved it. During the 2000s, Russia commenced a program to test means of delivering chemical warfare agents and to train personnel from special units in the use of such weapons. This program subsequently included investigation of ways of delivering nerve agents, including by application to door handles. Within the last decade, as I said, Russia has produced and stockpiled small quantities of Novichoks under this program. Thirdly, motive. Sergei Scripal was a former Russia military intelligence officer from the GRU. He was convicted of espionage in 2006. It is highly likely that the Russian intelligence services view at least some of its defectors as legitimate targets for investigation in assassination. We have information indicating Russian intelligence service interest in the Scripals, and this dates back as far as 2013, at least as far as 2013, when email accounts belonging to Yulia Scripal were targeted by GRU cyber specialists. Mr. President, none of these stocks and production have been declared in Russia's CW declaration. It is clear that Russia is in breach of its obligations to declare its CW programme. I'd now like to turn, if I may, Mr. President, to an update on the Scripals themselves and their medical condition and the consular situation, and then also on the investigation itself. The Russians asked us to pass on the offer to provide consular services to Yulia and their request to see her, and we have done that. Yulia herself said in a statement on 11th of April, "I have access to my friends and family. I have been made aware of my specific contacts at the Russian embassy who have kindly offered me their assistance in any way they can. At the moment, I do not wish to avail myself of their services, but if I change my mind, I know how to contact them." A medical update from the medical director at Salisbury District Hospital. In the 4 weeks since the incident in the city centre, the Scripals have received round-the-clock care from clinicians, and they have been able to draw on advice and support from world-leading experts in this field. Because of the Scripals' right to privacy, I will not go into great detail about the treatment we have been providing, but we can say the following. Nerve agents work by attaching themselves to a particular enzyme in the body, which then stops the nerves from working properly. This results in symptoms such as sickness, hallucinations, and confusion. The hospital, in treating the patients, was able to stabilize them, ensuring that the patients could breathe and blood could continue to circulate. They then needed to use a variety of different drugs to support the patients until they could create more enzymes to replace those affected by the poisoning. The hospital also used specialized decontamination techniques to remove any residual toxins. Both patients have responded exceptionally well to the treatment that we have been providing, but both patients are at different stages in their recovery. Turning to decontamination and the investigation, as we have said before, this has been one of the most comprehensive and complex investigations into the use of chemical weapons ever undertaken. It has involved 250 police detectives. They have been supported by a range of experts and partners, and they have gone through more than 5,000 hours of video footage, and they have interviewed more than 500 witnesses. The British government announced on 17 April that decontamination work in Salisbury is starting this week. It will take some months to complete. In total, 9 sites, including 3 in the city centre, have been identified as requiring specialist decontamination. This will involve a complex process of testing, the removal of items which could be contaminated and that might in turn harbour residual amounts of the agent, and it also involves chemical cleaning and retesting. All waste will be safely removed and incinerated. Each site will not be released until decontamination is complete. Mr. President, we've heard a number of allegations against the UK and against the findings from the Russian Federation. I would like to deal briefly, if I may, with some of the most egregious. One accusation that we faced today and in recent days was that Julia had not been poisoned, that the British government had in fact drugged her and put her in a coma and then injected her with the poisons that were found. Mr. President, this is more than fanciful, it is outlandish. That sort of thing may happen in Russia, but I can assure the Council it does not and will not happen in the United Kingdom. Secondly, Mr. President, the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, has claimed that traces of the toxic chemical BZ were found in the samples analysed by the OPCW, and this disclosed the location of one of the independent laboratories that OPCW used. The OPCW themselves have not disclosed the identity of the labs, nor have they published any information about BZ samples in the executive summary that they released to the public. So it is an interesting question, Mr. President. How and why does Russia think it knows who tested the samples and what result they found? By making this confidential information public, Russia has in turn breached the confidentiality that states parties owe the OPCW under the Chemical Weapons Convention. On the substance of that allegation, Mr. President, the OPCW Director General explained in his statement today that a separate sample, separate from the samples taken from the Scripals and their environment, a separate sample with BZ in it was sent with the samples taken from Salisbury to the designated laboratories for testing. This is called a controlled sample, and it is a routine procedure carried out in these tests so OPCW can test whether the lab's findings are accurate. The Director General has confirmed unreservedly that there was no BZ in any of the samples taken by OPCW in Salisbury. I believe, Mr. President, that Russia is fully familiar with this procedure, so I would be grateful to know what motive Mr. Lavrov had in setting out this obfuscation. Mr. President, Russia continues to be asked to be involved in the UK's independent investigation. It is quite clear that they are both suspected of involvement and that their behaviour has undermined their credibility on this. As I said before, this is an arsonist turned firefighter trying to investigate his own fire. Russia has failed to establish any good reason, under the CWC or otherwise, why they should be involved in the UK's independent police investigation. But if I may, Mr. President, I repeat what I said at the first briefing in this council that I took part in on Salisbury. We did go to the Russian Federation before we went to OPCW to ask them if this was a rogue attempt by one of their agents, and if so, to cooperate with us in trying to get to the bottom of it and resolve the case. And the Russian Federation did not agree to that request, Mr. President. Rather, they refused to take it seriously. On 13 April, the Russian Federation transmitted to the United Kingdom a list of questions under Article 9 of the Chemical Weapons Convention. We will respond as soon as possible, and certainly within the 10 days stipulated in the Convention. We will respond to Russia, who made the request, but we will share our response with all states parties, and if I can, under the CWC, Mr. President, I will of course share it with members of the Council. Russia said that their requests were urgent, and they have asked us for an answer by no later than 17th April, which we have not done, because we have 10 days. But we regret that Russia did not consider it urgent when we asked them for an explanation on 12th of March. Our questions, Mr. President, remain unanswered. Mr. President, that concludes the briefing I have to offer the Council today. We are at the Council's disposal to answer any questions. We are also very willing to continue to keep the Council updated if the Council would like that. We're happy to do that in person, or possibly, so as not to disrupt your timetable, in writing. I should mention also that we held an open briefing for all Member States yesterday in the General Assembly, and we had a number of questions that we were able to answer. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement, and now give the floor to the representative of the plurinational state of Bolivia. Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, we wish to thank the Undersecretary General and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Ms. Izumi Nakamiso, for her report, of which we take note. Secondly, we wish to welcome the prompt recovery of those who were affected in this incident. Mr. President, Bolivia believes that the use of chemical weapons by any actor and in any circumstances is a heinous action against international peace and security, for which reason we reiterate our concern at the challenge that the non-proliferation regime faces. Any use of chemical weapons or agents as weapons is completely reprehensible for humanity and goes against the provisions in the Convention on Chemical Weapons as well as international law. The Chemical Weapons Convention is a multilateral instrument adopted by 192 states. It is important for this model of a multilateral agreement continue with the same integrity and independence. Mr. President, it is essential to keep the credibility of this international